Sorry, guys. This is not how I wanted to start, but there is always something happening around me, and kids posed some barely solvable problems, which delayed the start of the stream somewhat. I apologize for that, and I hope this will be the only issue with today's stream. As usual, brief sound check. Tell me if you can hear me. Yeah, okay, I've I've gotten that. This will be the last stream in this format for a while, because I will be I'll go to Moscow tomorrow to play in the Tal Memorial, and then there will be a very small break between that and the super final in Novosibirsk, starting in mid October, and then the European Club Cups. I might squeeze something in between Tal and the super final, but I'm not sure. There are some ideas in place to do something during tournaments, but I can't promise those will materialize. So for now, this probably will be a kind of a wrap up show until potentially maybe mid-November. And I've been doing sort of 2 hours flat for the past week, but today I think the schedule allows for a little more time, so we'll maybe do it for slightly longer than that, provided I'm still alive by the 2-hour mark. So without further ado, let's play some Blitz. And I will, since the question why I'm so poor at this actually even made it to the Q&A session, I will probably pay less attention to chat this time during games, and I will try and get back in touch with you guys when the game is finished. Keeping to my policy of no Greenfield in these sessions. Which has been a mixed bag, so to speak. I'm not sure it's such a great idea for me to avoid the Greenfield entirely, and this was probably a misplay. I should have played g5, knight h5 straight away. I think with pawn on e3 he can now avoid knight takes g3 in those positions, which will be a regrettable development. Let's see if I can get some kind of a Benko going instead. I'm not sure what this is supposed to achieve, to be honest. I do create a threat of knight e4, but I don't expect my opponent to blunder that. And my idea was to play e6 against almost any move, but to be entirely frank, I'm not sure if let's say if he plays knight g2, which is I think the most obvious and the best reply to what I'm doing here. If I play e6, he plays bishop e2, and if I take on d5, I've only managed to improve white's position, not the other way around. So frankly, I'm far from impressed by my opening choices so far in this game. Maybe I can do it this way, but it's difficult to imagine, if he takes on e6, my play is justified, but no sane person, I think, would ever take on e6 in this position, and I think I will end up with a very passive and unpleasant position as a result. I'm not sure why my opponent felt it was required to take on f6. I would never really part with his dark square bishop in this way, in his spot. I think that gives me additional hopes here. He can play a5. It will generally this gives him some options on the king on the queen side here, but my bishop on g7 is now a very, very strong piece, and I don't know why I was given such liberties in the center. With the bishop on h4 and a knight on f6 alive, you know, plans like this, like the one I am implementing right now with f5 and e4, would have been a lot harder to achieve. It's a bit regrettable that I will have to give up my bishop on c8. I would like it alive for, you know, for the future, but my position is regardless quite comfortable here. I think I will make my opponent take, just for the sort of for clarity's sake. It doesn't really make a great deal of difference whether you know, where he captures his bishop on d7 or on c8, but I want to sort of clarify the issue. Ask him if he actually wants to take or not. Might be a good idea not to. I quite like what he's doing here, because with the knight on b6, the potential plans connected to the b4 break become a bit more sensible from my opponent's perspective. I'm actually kind of tempted to do something about it, because by doing what I've just done, I'm making his b4 break plans, I think, much harder to realize. And if he plays queen b3, which is you know, a possible reaction here, I think he will now be very, very tied up to the protection of this pawn on b6, and I can start immediate play on the other side of the board. Allowing f3 seems frankly suicidal, but ef4 rook takes f4 gives me a fantastic outpost for the g7 bishop on the d4 square, so it's also not a very attractive option from the white side. But now with the pawn on f3, it's important that white has this bishop on g4, so he is not getting mated straight away, or maybe not at all, but this is a good move though. I may have been somewhat over-optimistic about this position, because as mentioned, with the bishop on e6, it's much harder for the black queen to actually reach the squares from which it can give mate, and that makes the position a lot less clear. But I think I can do... This is very counterintuitive, a move like this, but it's connected with very concrete ideas. And also it relieves the pressure my opponent was trying to put on the e4 pawn, which is, I think, the most important detail in this position. Connected with bishop d7, and then I want to continue playing for mate. If he goes bishop e6 check here, I can even take and play queen g5, g3, let's say queen f5, and pick up the pawn on e6, because queen h3 will be a huge threat. So he probably... Yeah, that probably is the best move in the position. I was about to say that this is quite likely the best move in the position. But I don't want to give him... if I take on f3, he takes on d7 and plays king h1, rook g1. And this is a kind of a setup I don't want to allow. I don't want to give his rooks easy access to open files, which is why I'm doing this. And my next moves will be rook f3 and rook bf8, almost against anything. I mean, my immediate threat, of course, is queen takes g4, queen f3 check. But if he goes king h1, as I think he should actually, I think this is the best move in the position. My plan was to go rook f3, but maybe queen c2 is not so bad. It's still, I think, the correct decision, though. Because now I have a huge threat of rook h3. And if I force him to play rook g1, then rook takes f2 wins on the spot. After queen c2, if I play rook h3 straight away, he takes on e4, I take on h2, he goes... Yeah, but I can start with rook e8. Because if I play rook h3, somewhat surprisingly maybe, after queen takes e4, rook takes h2 and king g1, there is no mate. But this way I force him to finally play rook g1, and I win the queen with rook takes f2, so that seems to be an efficient conclusion to the game. Okay. Good enough for the first game, I think. As a bit of a warm-up, this was reasonable. Although I should probably learn what to do against the bishop g5, king's Indian properly, instead of sort of blundering about the way I've been doing in these blitz sessions. This is not the first time I completely failed to equalize against that line. I played the A game with no success, and I played all the PLO events also with absolutely nothing to show for it. I played, for instance, the 6 max today, and frankly, it was a bit of a bad beat, because I got a table with you know, proper regulars who understood the format perfectly and were basically shoving every flop to get a large stack for later portions of the tournament. So against people who are playing like that, you do need to run quite well, and I didn't. Not quite sure what I'm supposed to do here, and this is not the first time I'm quite likely to get a poor position against the Mora, but what to do? Bishop g5, bishop c5, queen g5 kind of bothers me. I wonder if I can play knight e5 though. It's probably a blunder of some sort, but I don't see why, so I will try. My opponent's been playing very, very fast, and I was kind of wondering if I was doing something which has been refuted in the Mora books somehow, but hopefully not. This endgame should be, I mean, it's... Whoa! What did I just do? Oh god. Yeah, that was just a misclick, basically. I was supposed, of course, to take... That was just me talking too much. I was supposed to... I basically made the second move in the variation. I knew I was going to take on c4. And I was talking about this endgame. I mentioned the word endgame there. He probably goes rook d4, I go b5, b3. And white definitely has compensation for the pawn, but I think black is fine. But yeah, that was just a bit of a sort of hands going in front of the brain for 1 second. It's probably not that great for black, but it's definitely playable, and black still has the extra pawn he started with. So that was my intention. Should probably pay more attention to my move orders when I'm playing. That was not what I intended. People are clamoring for me to play the Spanish, so let's switch up from the standard fare of yeah, but nobody's gonna let me play the Spanish. Okay. This has been, obviously, it's a very topical line these days. A lot of people actually are playing the Italian quite seriously, and I can't say I know exactly what I'm doing here. And that's also not a premium, so I should probably stop with this. I keep on, you know, I never really expect challenges from non-premium members, and then I get sidetracked. We'll have to resign, I guess, since the draw offer seems not to have succeeded. That's my mistake. Not gonna do that again. I apologize. I seem to be a bit hassled today. Yeah, and was going to do a bit of a Hearthstone related, not a rant, but was about to give a speech, but then realized it's a different chess dude. Okay, so here there are some there are some quirky ways to try and get. There is, for instance, this move knight at knight c6, which is very rare and you know, not not without reason. And the idea is, if white plays knight f3, I can now try and switch to some less standard Greenfields, the ones that people who play knight c3 on move 6 there. Sorry, move 5. They don't normally allow this. So knight c6 is a possible way to play here, but if I think generally it might be advantageous for white to switch to some plans with e3 and knight g2 there, or maybe playing d5 as an immediate response. Whoops, sorry. Where the point of playing knight c6 before d6 is to try and save a tempo on d7, d6 in some weird versions of the Yugoslav lines, but I'm not entirely sure if it's any good for black. It is Greenfield now. I've sort of given up on playing the King's Indian in this game, but it's a weird kind of G3 Greenfield, somewhat non-standard. Because normally white doesn't really play e4 in these positions, and or at least he doesn't play e4 in positions where black can take on c3 is what I wanted to say. In general, in G3 Greenfields, white actually aims to force black to play d5 with the knight steal on b1, so that when black recaptures on d5, the knight can be driven away from the d5 square without actually allowing the knight to trade for the knight on c3. So the knight goes to b6. And here the knight actually was traded off on c3. I'm not sure if what I'm doing is actually so great from the objective viewpoint, but it's definitely playable, and it's also not your standard fare, so to speak. It does look risky from the black side a little bit, but on the other hand, this is a typical Greenfield structure where, you know, you get these positions in in particular this system with, let's say, knight e6, knight a5, b6, and bishop b7. You get in a lot of slower replies to the classical system, so-called classical system with 7 bishop c4 in the Greenfield. And there the bishop would be on d3, which I think is a better square than g2. So I'm not really that unhappy about my situation here. I think the bishop on g2 is a bit misplaced. Well, misplaced is a strong word, but I don't think it's the ideal square for it. I can play queen e6 here, attacking the pawn on e4, and try and play queen c4 later, but I think maybe it's time for me to start opening up, you know, the going for the standard Greenfield counterplay. Knight e5 is an interesting choice for my opponent here, because there is no immediate comfortable way to reply to it. I think I might consider taking it, but that's as usual in these types of positions. It's very committal and very risky, but might not be bad, because if he takes with the bishop, let's imagine knight e5. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. If he takes with the pawn, he well, creates a structure which in general is quite decent for black if he doesn't get mated on the king side. And here I have a choice between knight c6 and f6, and my plan was to play knight c6 here. I don't want to weaken my kingside position further than absolutely necessary here. And I want to give my opponent a choice. He can now once again give up this bishop and allow this structure change with d4 takes e5. Sorry, something happening to my voice today. Or he can play bishop f4, which will lead to positions where black is black will end up being a reasonably healthy pawn up. But of course, the fact that I had to give up my dark square bishop and the pawn is on g6 will mean that there will always be long-term counterplay for my opponent here. Both options are perfectly viable, like playing like something like rook fd1, knight e5, d5, queen e6, and f4, for instance, is perfectly fine for white. I'm not sure what this is about. I can ignore it, I can also maybe even take it. I can also take on d4. But I think I will just sort of stick to the original plan. Now that I have the c6 square for the bishop a5, a6 is not really a threat. And if these pawns come off, yeah, this is sensible play by my opponent, but not something that worries me unduly. I want to play b5 next move, and if he takes, I have queen d1 check, winning at least the e4 pawn back. I like h4 though. I actually quite like what my opponent is doing here. But I am in time to play queen d3, which is very, very important. And now, yeah, the important move to evaluate would be h6, which is a very committal choice, and I'll be hugely impressed if he does this. This, I think, is much less interesting, because now I'm simply better. I have a pawn majority, and also he did not manage to fix my king on the back rank, and my pawns will just run, and there's really no counterplay on the other side. Had he played h6 here, if I take on c3, rook d1 is almost mate, so I think h6 was a lot more critical there. And right now, I mean, the b and c pawns will just win. I also have 2 minutes against 15 seconds, which is very unusual against a strong player. Oops, sorry. Can I tell you anything about Aparin, Kokorev, Goganov, and Bocharov? I don't know a lot about these guys. I've played Goganov a number of times. He's a very solid player, you know, quite well prepared, you know, takes chess very seriously. I played Bocharov in the Berlin Rapid and Blitz, and he absolutely destroyed me in a Rapid game, I think, and I barely drew the Blitz game. So when he is on form, he is a very, you know, very strong player, and Aparin is one of the promising youngsters, and Kokorev has been crushing the Russian Cup circuit for a while. So all of them are very strong players, but I don't really have too much in a way of personal experience with them. Don't expect it to be an easy tournament by any means. A3 is a bit slow, or at least it's supposed to be a little bit slow, because b4 is not really a threat in these types of positions. You don't actually need to prevent it so early on. I never played Tal. I've only seen Tal from a distance once in my life, so I don't have any personal personal stories to share. I did record a series on Tal for Chess24 where I've put in some thoughts on you know, the role Tal as a kind of a inspirational figure played in my chess career, but there are no actual personal stories to tell because we did not really. I'm a bit too young. Which is not a sentence I have an occasion to use very often. I just realized. Generally, I think playing a3 and then f3 should be a bit slow, and although if he castles queenside right now, it still does resemble reasonably normal positions you sometimes get in the English attack, so it might very well still be quite playable for white. But generally speaking, if I am in time to play something like bishop e7, castle short, and play either knight f6 or knight e5, I should be doing quite well here in you know, my understanding of how these positions work. It's important not to blunder something connected with knight f5 though. Let's say if I play bishop e7 here, I need to make very, very certain I don't lose to knight f5. But I don't see how I do. I could also start with knight e5 here and try and get this bishop on d3 traded off, and then go for some moves to finish development. Might be a better choice. I hesitate saying anything about forthcoming video series for the website because, and this is a full piece blunder. I did not really expect this to happen, but this doesn't work at all. I just win a full bishop. Because I've been feeding you stories about upcoming series for a while and haven't really recorded anything due to, well, time constraints and other issues, and the suggestion of me doing a series on Alikine is not absurd, but I don't want to, you know, give it any additional weight because, frankly, I've been doing quite a lot of live stuff, but my recording game, so to speak, hasn't been particularly impressive in the past half a year, maybe. So this is the position we reached in the game. I had to abort because I realized 6 moves in that I was playing somebody who is not non-premium, so that had to be scrapped. I think current theory is focused in part on some b4, b5 ideas in this position, and also, of course, rook e1 is always a very serious move in these types of positions. Or h3, because after rook e1 I was giving a lot of thought to the idea of giving up the e5 pawn by playing bishop g4, bishop h5. And here I think what they do is knight b6, bishop b5, bishop d6, which is a bit miserable. But what to do? And also I think, isn't this also a theoretical move in this position? The problem with this is that it might lead to some kind of forced draws. Although, frankly, maybe I've seen this position with a pawn on a4 and not a pawn on h3. I have a feeling that this is the position the game between Vishy Anand and Wesley Saw reached in the Greenfield Cup, but I think the pawn was already on a4 there for white. Here I thought I can play queen d5. I mean, if all else fails, I can definitely play queen d5 and then bishop takes f2 and queen takes b5. But I will look for something more. I will look for something more attractive and probably not find anything, because if I allow d4, the bishop will just escape along that diagonal, which is not something I would welcome. And against, I think, any move, I will be able to jump with this bishop somewhere. d4 bishop takes d4, for instance, and then the bishop on b5 should be recaptured. It shouldn't really worry white either, because I will just win back the pawn I've given up on e5, so none of this is actually a problem. And in fact, I think maybe d4, taking with the pawn here, not the queen, but taking with the pawn and playing knight c3 with tempo might be a, yeah, that was what I was about to suggest, might be a very decent idea from white here. Because I kind of struggle for comfortable squares for this queen. Don't really like, you know, any of the squares available to me. Maybe queen b4 to bring it back to d6. If it gets chased around further. And if he goes bishop f4, I can choose between knight g6 and knight g5. I'll probably go knight g5. Trade off some more material, and then I will feel a bit more comfortable with my position here. Generally in this structure, if you manage to play f6 and not lose any material, you're quite happy. So I can waste another, well, waste is a strong word, and actually maybe I should have used the other knight. That was a bit of a, you know, you can't call it a misclick, but that was like muscle memory. You play knight e7, d5 because it opens the e-file. It feels a lot very natural, but actually the other way around. I could have played b6 here right now and developed the bishop to the long diagonal, which would also be very, very sensible. But I think I'm still doing quite fine. A somewhat counterintuitive way of playing in these types of positions would be to take on e3 and actually give white, sort of solve white's Isolani problem for himself. But black very typically in these types of positions has this problem, which I think possibly Mark Dvoretsky was the first to describe as I'm not sure if I'm translating this in the most correct fashion, but the problem where you basically have more than one piece vying for a very important ideal square. And I have two knights here, which obviously both want to be on d5. And it might favor me here to trade one of them off so that I don't have that problem anymore. Bishop f4 is a decent move here, because if I take on f4, he takes on f4 with the knight, and I would have serious issues on how to parry the threat of knight e6. This is slower. This, I think, should be less of an issue for me. I still should pay attention not to blunder any tactics, though. Could run into some really nasty tactical problems, because my king side feels a bit unprotected. And once again, I would probably prefer this knight to be, you know, if I played the other knight to g5, the e7 knight would later have the option of going to g6, which would be a good square for it. I did manage to, I mean, by playing rook e7, I made sure that my pawn on g7 is protected now and will stay protected in the immediate future at least. So I shouldn't be getting mated straight away. This actually allows queen c8 check. I was planning to play knight g5, but maybe I still should, because I can recapture with the queen, and queen c8 check will not be such a huge deal. And in this way, I'm trying to force my opponent to enter some kind of an endgame where I'm a bit unhappy I had to play b6, but I still have a bishop against a knight in an endgame on both flanks, and I have a nice Alikine to sort of work against. I wouldn't say I'm a lot better, but black is probably slightly more comfortable here if he takes. And he probably should take, because I also threaten to play f6, f5, which would be a problem. I'm not sure if this is such a great idea for me to be expanding in this way, but I'm trying to create immediate problems for my opponent by, you know, playing against his queenside straight away. Trying to pick up some material. I'm also slightly playing against the clock here, but not a lot. I honestly believe that what I'm doing is best play. Okay. Somewhat recovered after my misstep against the Morar, which was unnecessary. Let's play some Pirc. I think I don't play nearly enough Pirc in these sessions. Or the modern, I think, as I'm supposed to call it. It used to be an opening I played at a very, you know, serious level in terms of opposition. I played it as a repertoire opening in all of my tournaments, including, I think, my first ever black game against Vichy in Linares, which got me a prize for the junkiest opening of the tournament from MiG. I still remember that because I was frankly a little bit upset about it. I was actually a bit better out of the opening. I did lose because Vichy generally does very well against me regardless of how the opening goes, but I felt I got unjustified stick for my opening choices there. H3 is the correct move here, actually. I used to play G3 against the Pirc myself, and it's important to have the option of meeting knight C6 with bishop E3 and not allow knight G4. So my opponent is definitely doing the right thing here. There are some quirky ways of playing against it, but generally these types of positions they end up very, very solid for white, but also quite difficult to prove white has, sorry about that, white has any kind of serious advantage, because black's position also lacks weaknesses. After knight d2 here, I think it's important to play b5 straight away, because if you give white a couple of tempi to play, for instance, g4 and knight g3, which is a very standard maneuver in these types of positions, increasing your space on the king's side, g3 is also a very useful square for this knight if it goes back to e2, because on e2 it doesn't really have that much in the way of prospects, but on g3 it supports future pawn storms on the king's side. So after knight d2, I think it's important to play b5, and this I think allows this little bit of tactic if he plays b3 here, which is the most obvious move in the position. But I think he should probably consider playing queen e2. Queen e2 might be a better choice here objectively. Well played by my opponent, because if he plays b3 here, I can play c5 and then bishop takes h3, winning a pawn. Well spotted by my opponent. This type of move, it's also a reasonably standard move in these types of positions, but it's generally it's quite risky to do this, and I might actually have reason to regret it, because yeah, bishop knight b5, I'm actually not in time to play bishop c6 and a6. I somehow thought I was, but I'm not. And this creates a bit of an issue, because I kind of badly need to be able to do that in order not to, well, lose, is what I want to say. And this is such a horrible move to even contemplate. But bishop c6 f4, I think I might just objectively be lost. And here I want to basically, regardless of what he recaptured with, I want to play a6 and then b5 to secure the c4 square for my knight. And if he takes on b7 here, the queen will get sort of shuffled around for a bit, and I hope to get some counterplay against it. Although objectively I think he can and should take this pawn. This is a Beal shot, well spotted by Galactic. It was the top shirt on the shelf, so I decided that it's Kismet and just went with it. I can play rook e7, queen b3, rook b8, and queen a3 is not a good move, but queen a4 might be, and it's worrying me. I can also start with knight c4, but I'm not sure if it's an improvement or not, to be honest. He should go queen a4, and after rook takes b2 he has rook b1. That's the annoying part, because then I will have to trade my active rook for his somewhat passive rook, and I will not really like my position very much, I think. But the thing about it, I don't really see any choice, sadly. He can also consider playing f4, but f4 here would be connected with an idea of a rook b4, f takes e5, which I think is a bit too adventurous and not really required. And I quite like what he's doing instead. Although queen b6 seems to be just about playable. With, hang on, now f4 actually kind of wins. Sort of. This is kind of unfortunate, because with my queen on b6, the same idea is absolutely crushing. I will actually have to play f4, knight e5, d7, because f4, rook b4, fe5 would just win the game for my opponent there and then. I like this a lot less for him, because this actually gives me this chance to trade off the knight for the bishop on e3, which I should, I think, grab with both hands. Unless rook takes d6 wins. Rook takes d6 is actually quite annoying there. But I still think it's better than leaving him this bishop on e3. But this I shouldn't be much worse at all here. I managed to sort of navigate my way out of a potentially dodgy situation, and this is a very reasonable position for black. Probably not worse at all. Might even be slightly better, because I actually have some play against this f2. Whoa. Rook takes d4 just wins. Yeah, I'm not... Well, not just wins. I actually have some counterplay, but yeah, that was... I'm not at my sharpest today, seemingly. That was a very large miss by my opponent. I don't really mind playing g5 here, because I don't think this you know, so-called weakness will ever get exploited in this game. And now I can start picking up stuff on the other side of the board. Yeah, the bishop did land on f5, but it's kind of irrelevant because the rook will never really join the attack. And my situation on the king side is you know, very, very safe here, and I can just start pushing the a-pawn down the board, or the c-pawn, frankly. And the weakness on f2 will mean that white doesn't really have any counterplay to speak of. I can play something like queen, let's say, yeah, I'll start with the a-pawn for now, just to illustrate to my opponent what I'm, you know, the crudeness of my plans, so to speak. And it's actually very, very difficult for him to do much about it, but he could have picked up a full piece there. Two things I wanted to illustrate. After queen b6, if he plays f4 here, I'm pretty sure he didn't do it because of rook b4 and knight c4. But f takes e5, rook takes a4, and knight takes a4. Now my, you know, my entire chess set is hanging. I cannot stop e takes f6 with another fork, and I just lose so much material. Then you know, this is just resignable, so I would have to retreat, which is good for white, obviously. And then I got a little bit carried away with how good my position suddenly was here, and I played rook f6. After which he could have just taken on d4, queen b1 check, and I think the cleanest way is just to play bishop f1 here. And yeah, I would have to resign here. Too many stupid blunders so far by myself. I will endeavor to do better. Let's do something I haven't done since about 1992. What's the correct move order here? I think I probably should start with knight c6, but it's not that important. Yeah, this line is probably the major reason why I stopped playing the Budapest, because it's just too dull for words, basically. You play this opening, which you know, people generally play in order to get, you know, exciting counterplay and, you know, non-standard interesting positions, and you end up with this structure which you're just not going to enjoy at all, and then you suffer for a while. And actually before might be very strong here. I don't remember the theory, but I kind of remember I'm supposed to give up this bishop and play d6 and b6, but that's just too horrible for a Banter game. Yeah, well played by my opponent. He spotted this tactic. If I take on b4, he takes. I take on a1, he takes on a1, and my knight is hanging. And if I take on b4, he takes on e5 and on g7, which is, to put it mildly, a bit of an issue here. So I think I am kind of forced to make this move. And then the question becomes, if he plays c5 here, does it ever come back out? To which I don't currently know the answer. If I play d6, I just end up with horrible positions. Taking on b4 without actually solving my bishop problems first is unthinkable. And yeah, it's very unclear how I am ever going to solve my a7 bishop problems here if he goes c5. If he doesn't go c5, as he didn't, I can at least hope that maybe I can develop the c8 bishop to some normal squares, reconnect my rooks, and then the bishop on a7 will not be, you know, such a horrible piece. It's still not a pleasant position by any means, But compared to how it would have looked after 13c5, this is a dream scenario for black. So I think this is actually I'm very happy I'm playing this game, because it will serve, I think, as a very nice cautionary tale for people who could potentially be tempted to try this out with black. It's not a horrible opening, but you need to know that you probably won't have much fun against a qualified opponent, so to speak. To people asking me to do these shows on YouTube, I can only say that I understand that viewpoint, but you know, if you've seen any of these shows, you probably know just how bad I am with any kind of technology. And as things stand currently, I can just about start a live stream show without it completely breaking down. Teaching myself how to do a YouTube show, I probably could have done this on a previous move as well, but now it's time, I think. Teaching myself how to do a YouTube show would be a very serious endeavor for me. I'm potentially overusing the word endeavor a little bit, and I'm sticking to live stream because I think for most people it works. It doesn't seem to be lagging that far behind, and complete videos are sometime later published on the YouTube channel anyway. So for the time being, I have no plans to try and teach myself new platforms. I just don't trust myself with the technology, to be honest. The meaning of life is quite obviously 42. I do try to play against people whose names I don't recognize. Wino Spider. I don't always manage, and I also basically I use two my first immediate filters, so to speak, are have I heard this, have I seen this or heard this nickname before on these shows, and secondly, at least in the first part of the show, I'm trying to play the highest rated challenges I see in the list. So that occasionally will result in me playing people I've played before, but when I start playing people who are somewhat lower rated, I do try and pick people I haven't played before, because yes, it does make a lot more sense. So we end up with this position where I have an extra pawn, but objectively I think it would be, if this were a tournament game against a good defender, I would not rate my chances of converting this very highly, because it's very difficult to create a passer on the queen side, and white has a pair of very decent bishops and no structural weaknesses. Therefore, potential conversions are tricky here because it's difficult to formulate a plan. And bishop d2 is a very decent move, because now bishop takes b4 is hinted at, but also there is this problem of rook g3 becoming a serious issue in the future, which is why I will start by playing bishop g6 so that I don't blunder rook g3 somewhere. And here I was hoping to find something very concrete to do with the current weakness of the first rank. I think my opponent was a little bit hasty in taking on b4. He didn't really need to. He could have played rook e3 actually, both on the previous move and also before taking my knight, and he would equalize immediately, seemingly. Yeah, there was a large miss by both of us, I think, because rook e3. I think I'm you know, I'm more or less obliged to just play queen wherever, I don't know, f8, d8. And now white can just take on e8 and take on b4 twice, and this position is completely sterile, and I would just offer a draw here. Can I speak on my lifelong passion of badminton? There are no words to describe how I feel about badminton, so I will not even attempt to. Okay, let's make this a modern show. Let's continue getting unpleasant positions out of the opening with black, and then struggling in them. In recent years, I kind of gravitated to this plan of playing this kind of a weird, very, very slow setup with a6, b6, e6, bishop b7, knight bd7. The thing about it is that e5 might just, in some specific positions, I think e5 might just directly refute it. Including maybe this one, to be honest. But not very many people decide to commit to e5 this early on, so this kind of a liberty gets goes unpunished. If he goes e5 here, at least I have knight d5. But I wouldn't be particularly happy about that either. I'm not sure about d5 though, although it's not really that bad at all, now that I've thought about it for a second. It's not a bad move at all. I could play c6, but then he just sort of doesn't react at all. Maybe it was still better than c5, because when I play c5, it's very, very easy for white to just never react to it at all. And after c6, maybe I could force him to commit to some kind of a... Yeah, I think this is just a mistake. I think giving me this Sicilian structure when my opponent was not at all forced to is just a mistake. It gives me a lot more squares to play with. And had he switched to knight d2, f4, and some play in the center, my position would feel incredibly cramped and quite unpleasant. Whereas here, I get a very, very nice version of some kind of a slow dragon. I would prefer my pawn on a7 here, so that my pawn on b6 would never be hanging, but I think black is still quite comfortable. Yeah, well, why not c6 instead of c5? Because I've not been playing particularly well today so far. I think is the best answer I can manage. White is also, of course, doing perfectly fine here. It's very difficult to, you know, not be fine out of the opening in these types of positions. It's also very, very relevant that he played a4 early on, and the same position, but if you can imagine the position with me having the pawns on a6 and b5 and him having a pawn on a3, I would feel a lot happier about my chances, because I would have the b6 square for my queen, the c4 square would be a lot easier to occupy later in the game by one of my knights, and so on and so forth. Whereas right now, none of these things are true. And also, I would probably not give me so many free tempi here by allowing me this exchange in this particular edition, so to speak. I'm thinking, I'm trying to choose between the immediate knight e5 and starting with e6. It probably leads to the same, but I will give my opponent a chance to play queen d4 check here, which I think is not a very strong move. Yeah, there will be a Blitz tournament as a kind of a drawing of lots for the Tal Memorial, as they tend to do in many of these top tournaments these days. It will be on Sunday, and it will decide who gets more whites and so on. I somehow thought queen f6 will be strong here, but it's not actually that good. And that kind of leads me to it forces me to reassess the entire position. I will have to go a lot slower here. Queen c7, rook fd8, queen c5, that kind of a plan, or the immediate queen c5 here. And once again we come back to the point that the pawn on b6 will actually be weak in all of these positions, and I'm not certain I equalized suddenly, which would not at all be an issue if it were on b5, or if the pawn was on a7. I haven't seen the game you're referring to, MFM 22, but I think it's likelier than that Magnus was just encouraging his young opponent than the other theory. But you can't rule anything out. Knight c4 is an incredibly annoying threat here. I need to create some kind of immediate counterplay here to avoid getting completely rolled over. And before knight c6, knight c4, I am banking on the fact that knight takes b4 exists, and I thought I probably am not losing there, but once again I wasn't entirely certain. And this is generally a very ugly move, but I think this pawn actually reaches d4, which makes this move, you know, it's possible to consider it because the pawn will get to d4 next move, and it will create some counterplay. Although rook d1, d4, bishop f1 may have been very strong there. And I was about to blunder quite a lot of material here, but caught myself just in time. My plan was to play gf5, bishop f5, knight c4, but that actually loses to bishop takes c8, which would be kind of embarrassing. I can play knight c4 straight away, but allowing f6 check was never really you know, very high on the list of things I wanted to do. And I don't want to, you know, the discussion of, you know, just how strong my opponent is and why is he rated 1693, I think is counterproductive. We don't know, we will never know. He might just play, it might be his second rated game on the website, so I don't encourage this type of discussion. I don't think it leads anywhere. And now I am, well, objectively, I don't know if this position is necessarily winning for black, but I'm better, obviously. And I also have a lot more time, so I probably should be able to convert it one way or the other. Or not. You never know with me. Although King h4 once was a bit of a mistake. No, this was very well played by my opponent in the first half of the turn, the game, and then when time kind of ran a bit short for him, he started making mistakes. And yeah, it also, you know, as people have correctly pointed out in chat, it's very difficult for me to compare, you know, anyone to Magnus at any age, because only Magnus really knows how good he was at any age. So regardless of how true it actually was, it's a nice comment, nice encouraging comment to make to a young player, and well done by Magnus, but I can't judge. It's been ages since I played this with white. I always play, I don't know why I did this right now. I always play 3-5 against the Caro these days. Haven't returned to this material in about 10 years. I used to know something, but I no longer really do. And this is some kind of, you know, really heavy theoretical stuff, which you probably shouldn't try without some very concrete knowledge. And frankly, I'm not at all convinced this makes any sense. But knight b6 is definitely, I mean, this is not how you can refute this idea, let's put it like this. It's always very tempting to start calculating some ideas connected with, let's say, knight takes h6, and they're not actually always that ridiculous. It might... I'm always just, you know, so attracted to this type of stuff because it just appeals to me on some kind of visceral level. Let's give it a shot. What do we have to lose? Probably knight g4 is very strong there. I can also start by playing knight e5 maybe. To not allow knight g4 at all. I mean, this is, you know, obviously very, very, how shall I describe this? It's very risky and also probably objectively incorrect, I think. But it's also very interesting and creates the most excitement possible in the given position, which is why I opted for it. And now I think I'm just winning, because queen g3 check, it not only threatens the mate on g7, it also threatens discover check with a knight, and I pick up the queen on ca c7. So the game actually will just wrap up here. So yeah, these types of ideas, they do exist in these positions because Black finds it surprisingly hard to actually coordinate his pieces properly. For instance, if he plays king g7 here, I can play bishop takes h6, king takes h6, knight takes f7, and this generally leads to mate because I have this queen g6 to follow up against anything. So despite only having a pawn for the piece here and, you know, black sort of starting the defense, it's black's move here, these types of positions, I think the machine will probably defend this, but in practical play against a human opponent, in particular in the blitz game, I think it's a very decent idea, as you as you have seen, it might just win you the game there and then. And no, I don't regret the day I learned chess, although my life probably wouldn't have been an empty void had I not learned how to play chess when I was 6, but it would be ridiculous for me to regret the day I learned chess, because chess has given me so many opportunities, and it's been... You know, you get paid to do something you enjoy. That's something weird is happening. Once again, yeah, I should probably make a move. Yeah, that's me being ridiculous again. Sorry, guys. Okay, let's go for some mainline Slav to embarrass myself properly. Yeah, this is I think the best way to go about this task, because I know well, next to nothing about the Botvinnik proper. I used to play the Moscow anti-Moscow with black, which means that my knowledge there is, you know, at least not completely non-existent. But in these positions I can sort of blitz out the first moves, but that's about it. Yeah, I do seem to have this issue of sometimes completely forgetting I need to make the first move for the game to start. I think what confuses me is that my clock is not running. It sometimes just sort of throws me for a loop there, because I expect my clock to start running, and it says 5 minutes against 5 minutes, and I'm sitting there expecting the clock to finally start, and it doesn't, and then I just get all confused and frozen. Yeah. This is why I generally don't play the Botvinnik with white, because you get into all these positions and you're supposed to do something in them, and I honestly don't know what I'm doing at all. Like, no idea. I think this is the line which is supposed to, I think, in current thinking, is supposed to be a forced draw of some kind, following some games, in particular between, I think, Kramnik and Anand. But I have no idea if I'm correct or not. Yeah, you can definitely ask questions, and you can see that I'm sort of answering them, but I can't promise I will answer every single one. Yeah, and this is the problem now, because I think I'm supposed to take on d5 and take on c4 and take on c6, and then it's... But why am I not losing the rook there? And this is not a good question to start asking yourself at this stage of the game, because against the prepared opponent, this is a recipe for complete disaster. Pretty sure I'm probably pretty sure and probably should not be in the same sentence, but I'm fairly certain I'm in a lot of trouble right now, because I think I somehow should have been able to win the c4 pawn by this point of the game, and as you can see, I haven't, and it's an important pawn which you really want to delete off the board by this point. Managed not to miss rook d1 check at least, so I'm not, you know, made a conscious choice not to blunder queen there, which I think was a good choice. But yeah, I still have no idea what's going on. I can only hope that maybe my opponent also doesn't have a very clear idea of what's going on currently due to my horrible misplacement. Misplacement? No, that's not a word. But you get what I'm saying. I could take on c4, but then he takes on g5, rook takes e6, king b7, and I couldn't find the move there. I'm pretty sure the move exists, but I couldn't find any. Evaluating positions, I think, comes down to recognizing patterns and sort of experience in general. I think experience is by far the biggest factor in teaching yourself how to evaluate. And here I was planning to play b3, but I now realized why that probably loses on the spot, which is very regrettable. Yeah, if I cannot play b3 here, and it seems like I cannot, I will struggle in this game. This will not be a very nice game from now on. I probably shouldn't have taken on h6 so quickly either. He can even play c3 here if he wants, because I can't take on b4 because of all the discovered checks. But I think rook takes f6 might just win. Not that there's anything necessarily wrong with just playing c3, as I already mentioned, because the knight on a4 presents a very, very beautiful picture. Yeah, and now I'm kind of committed to playing this, but rook takes f2 might actually be a forced win for black, which is kinda sad. But this is also very strong. I think rook takes f2 was potentially maybe even stronger, but this is also probably just winning for black, to be honest. Because I'm just not fast enough with my counterplay here. I'm not sure about knight e5 though. He may probably have had a better move, because now at least I have some knight e4 threats. I will show you the lines after rook following rook takes f2 after the game, but I think my problem was I saw it and I thought my position is probably completely rotten there, but I also saw absolutely zero choice for myself. So it was one of those situations where you make a move you believe is close to losing, but you still make it because you just have no other moves. And now I shouldn't be worse, at least, or at least not much worse, because I managed to trade off some pawns. He doesn't have the two connected passers on the queen side anymore, because I traded off the a7 for the pointless little pawn on c4, which wasn't doing anything at all. And yeah, this is you know, by far the best position I've had. This you know, starting from a certain point. Rook d4 is a good move though. I was kind of hoping to get it to some decent squares by playing knight f3, but just rook c4 back, I might objectively have to start repeating here, which is sort of regrettable. But I mean, considering what the position was like before, maybe I shouldn't be so greedy. Maybe I should just take it. Because I honestly think that if I dodge this repetition, I might lose. Like if I allow b3 and b2, I just don't like my position at all. And the rook on f1, I can play rook d1, but he goes rook c3, and I can't really activate this rook anyway. I can't find sort of any way around that line of thinking. So here he can play rook takes f2, And if I play king h3, which I thought for a second might be half decent, he just wins on the spot by rook h2, king h2, rook d2, winning my queen. If the king goes to the first, black can just play rook d2, and he gets the same position as in the game, but, you know, my pawn on f2 is already gone, which is a huge big deal, obviously. And if I take this rook, he goes rook d2, check, I go king e3, and the move I missed originally but then spotted is rook e2, check. And king e2, queen e4, and I think I might be getting mated by force here. But even if I don't, I'm pretty sure black wins a ton of material here with checks, can just pick up every single pawn of mine. These pieces on the queen side are, you know, incredibly miserable and don't really participate in the defense of my king. And yeah, in the final position, if I play h5 here, he goes b3, and I just don't see how I make any progress. And once this pawn actually lands on b2, it becomes incredibly dangerous. Like if I play rook a3, he goes rook b4, and then he might play b2 at any point. Whereas my h-pawn is not actually running any as of right now. So I think, although here I have knight d2, maybe I could have played h5. But somehow I was very concentrated on playing rook d1. And that actually is a worst version of the same, because once the rook leaves the f1 square, I can no longer play knight d2 in any kind of a position because the pawn on f2 will be hanging. So yeah, I think I probably should have paid more attention to h5, and I don't think I'm necessarily better there, but it was a chance to continue playing, which I would have taken had I assessed it properly. Okay, let's play somebody somewhat lower rated for a change. Yeah, well played, Skibby. I don't know. If you can tell me if you had actually seen rook f2 or not, would be interesting to me, because I think if you spot rook f2, you kind of have to play it. But apart from that, you played quite well. Yeah, I'm pretty sure rook c4 is what theory is saying there, but I couldn't work out why you just don't take the bishop on g5 and win. And this is where you're supposed to know these things. You're not supposed to be working them out live on air. And I had a feeling this is how theory goes, but I couldn't for the life of me figure out how to follow it up. So we're getting some kind of a classical Marathi type position here against Bolo. Yeah, if you saw rook f2, it's a bit of a pity you didn't play, because I think you would have won the game, and it would have been a nice game by you from start to finish. So here I'm kind of tempted to start something straight away, because I feel that although white of course will be slightly better regardless of what he does here, because the structure is just favorable to white, of course, but it's yeah, minus 14 is a good assessment there after rook takes f2. But you know, to my credit, I did mention it on air that I thought this was incredibly strong. But back to this position. The thing about this structure is that if black castles, plays bishop e6, let's say queen a5, puts the queen on c5, it's not a lot. So I'm very tempted to try and make something connected with the c4, c5 break work, because I think it should be possible to punish black a little bit here for, you know, if black wants the Marathi, he should probably choose different move orders, because here he has given me a lot of extra tempi. And as a side note, knight d5 here looks very, very attractive, because it seems like I'm spoiling the black structure on the king side, but actually I think it will be very well met by e7, e5. Yeah, bishop e2 is what you just blitz out if you don't start thinking. But I generally, it's my, you know, that's one of my issues. I kind of tend to start thinking in positions where it maybe is not required. If black just automatically plays something like castles, I think rook d1 will be very strong. But just taking on c5 might actually be okay. This is the move that worries me the most. Because then I think I'm forced to take on c5 with the queen, and it might not be really anything real at all. I still sort of like my position. I will be ever so slightly better there, but yeah, it's not gonna be earth-shattering here. But still, it's a bit of a change from what black normally gets in these types of positions. So at least on that count, I think we should welcome this move. People calling Skibby a booked up nerd in chat. I think that's... if I were Skibby, I would take it as a compliment. People are probably trying to insult him, but that's... to a chess player. I don't think this is any kind of an insult. It does lead to a symmetrical structure, but I'm hoping to use the fact that my pieces are better. Continuing to answer that question. I'm kind of hoping rook g1 will be sort of awkward for black to meet next move. But I probably overestimated my my chances here. I'm a bit short on time here to make this work properly. It's not a hugely ambitious approach, I have to say, but it's possible, and I stand by my choice, but it may not have been as good as I originally thought. And b6 is not a poor reply to it at all. I quite like it actually. I thought about it whilst my opponent was thinking, and I thought, yeah, this is probably one of the more sensible replies. But I still think I should be a bit better. This is a little bit too fanciful, but I really don't want to give black an easy way to play queen c7 when I play rook d1. I think whether I will get anything at all out of the opening here or not depends on how comfortable black will be in dealing with my forthcoming rook d1 move, which is why I'm putting the queen on this somewhat artificial square to make sure that when I play rook d1 the queen will have to go to e8, or black will have to put something on d7. Is Morozevich ever going to play again? Asks Spills. I don't know. He played a half and half match against Tiger Hiller person, half rapid chess, half Go in St. Petersburg in July. Seemingly did very well. I think he won both rapid games and also was close to winning both Go games. I think he takes his Go quite seriously these days. And if black plays queen d6 here, once again, this is... I should have castled actually. There was no reason for me not to connect my rooks immediately. But almost regardless of what I do, I will be slightly better. Because of this pawn on d6 being a weakness for the rest of the game. I'm not even paying any attention to any knight b5 tactics because I want to finish development, I want to double on the g-file, and then I will think about how to proceed. I don't want to get involved with any kind of immediate tactical ideas to win half a pawn somewhere. People speaking Georgian in chat. Georgian written with Latin spelling is not as melodious a language as it is in actuality. It's In particular, as a singing language, I think Georgian is very, very beautiful. More badminton questions from real Svidler. I will have to think of a proper lines of defense against this line of questioning, because I have to admit they are catching me completely unawares. One of my classmates played badminton at sort of city level, was a member of a junior team for Leningrad in those years. And I remember I once kind of half forced him to take out the equipment and sort of play against me in the yard. And it lasted about 2 volleys, and I realized that I will never be able to match that speed, even if I suddenly, you know, grew additional 5 arms, so we gave up. Somebody called Cricket. I've no idea how I never played this dude before, but that's an obvious choice. Somebody called Cricket from United Kingdom. Congratulations to Middlesex, the county champions 2016. Commiserations to my friends Mickey and Tara Adams, who live in Taunton and were for, I think, large parts of the day were expecting Somerset to win their first county championship since I think 1993, but it didn't materialize. I always replied to h4 with h6, which is sort of a high-risk strategy, but I like it better than h5, because if you play h5, you're committing to... I mean, the knight goes to h3 and then it goes to g5, and it's very, very uncomfortable. As frankly as this, I'm really, really not enjoying my position here. I think it might be objectively quite bad. e6 in particular is worrying me a great deal. Yeah. That's very life-threatening. Really unsure how I'm supposed to proceed from here, because I think it's just not a very nice position for black, and it's difficult to find something which is in any way attractive. I'm going to go for something which looks completely insane, but actually it just does look completely insane. I think I have to stop that sentence there. I was going to play something which upon reflection is just completely unplayable. Yeah, this is just a very, very poor position for black. I think I kind of need to do this, but I would not be at all surprised if it lost by force. But my point is, I need to get some squares for this bishop to go to after h5, h6. If I play knight df6, which is the only square available, the only normal square available to this knight currently, if I go knight df6 there, and white plays h6, the only square this bishop can go is back to f8, which is just, you know, too ugly to contemplate. And here, at least, I have secured this f6 square for the bishop, which I am hoping will give me a slightly freer game. And if I somehow manage to play queen a5, bishop d7 and castle long, my position might not be lost. But it's a lot of conjecture is going into this reasoning. Laying a bit of a trap there, because if he goes bishop takes g4, I can take on g5 and knight d3 check. And I'm 2 moves away from, you know, realizing my very modest dreams. Bishop d7 and castles. But the thing is, if he is in time to force the pawn from g2 to g5, I can just resign as well. So, yeah, my issues will not be solved by just castling. I will also somehow have to fight against the pawn appearing from g2 to g5. If it lands there, those 2 pawns just queen. There will be no way to survive that. So I think I might have to... I mean, bishop d7 probably needs to be played almost against anything, but then I might have to switch to some kind of really weird defensive ideas like knight f7, queen g5, for instance, to just sort of stop dying immediately. If he goes, let's say, rook dg1 here, I think I need to do this. Otherwise, my position is kind of resignable. g4, queen g5, and hope this kind of a makeshift blockade survives for a while. But it just doesn't, as I realize now. He can play knight f3 here, which is a move I missed originally. And it sort of wins. Yeah, very well played by my opponent from a certain moment on. Certain moment in that sentence probably being move 1. I can't find, you know, any fault with any of his decisions here. Got completely crushed. Yeah, I think this is my best chance actually, which says a lot about my position. It's not, how to put it, it's not immediately lost, although there's, you know, very little doubt it is actually lost objectively. But I have this kind of a pawn feast in the center, which I can try and protect for a while. But yeah, I mean, objectively, of course, I'm just a piece down here for, you know, no real compensation. It's a question of technique. I wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't resign in this position if this were a classical game. So I'm not resigning here, obviously. But yeah, it's a very, very miserable situation to find yourself in, obviously. You know, if I could play e6 and d5 straight away, if I could make those 2 moves in sequence, my position would improve to a degree. And actually here I'm beginning to think I might be able to even sort of save it on merit, because by allowing d5 in this position, my opponent actually allowed quite a reasonable amount of counterplay. It might actually be difficult for him to even keep his material alive. because d4 followed by e4 is a very strong threat against whatever he plays here. So I win this piece back. And now I'm suddenly, well, I don't know if I'm winning, but I'm better. This king will be very safe on a7. Yeah, that was a bit of an undeserved victory, to be honest, but as mentioned, it wasn't a totally lost position, as you have seen. I mean, I managed to first complicate matters and then even win it without him, you know, blundering a piece in one move, so to speak. So, but up to somewhere here, my opponent played, I think, an exemplary game. I really enjoyed. Well, enjoyed is the wrong word. I felt his play was exemplary, as I mentioned. But yeah, decided not to resign for once, which is, people have been telling me for years that some games can actually be saved by not resigning. I didn't believe them. Okay, haven't played knight f3 in a while. Yeah, pre-moving king a7 there was a bit stupid, but actually even knight e4 would not have saved him there, because I mean the e-pawn queens anyway. Sorry, Cricket Dude, you played very well, but on occasion I will continue in positions like this, and yeah, not much to be said. I was thoroughly outplayed in the first half of the game. Any chance to see an example how you organize your file, asks Klinka. Well, it's difficult to show on this, you know, in this format. It's almost impossible, I think, to give you any kind of a glimpse into how my files are structured. But I can tell you, let's say when I try to study a new opening, my general process is I create a database for this specific opening. I don't like working with mega database in its uncut form, so to speak. So I would create a database specifically for this opening, importing games from Mega and also from my yearly collections, which I keep separate. And then I would sort of try and identify critical positions, create sort of survey games for those critical positions by choosing a number of games which look like they are relevant to what's going on in the line. I'm kind of wondering if knight c4 is somehow refuted, because my opponent seems to be happy to allow it, but it still looks quite strong to me. And then, you know, I would create those kind of survey files with games by strong players which seem relevant to me, and I would study those and try and get some kind of a feel for the opening and proceed from there. He probably should play some... Yeah, I was about to say, just don't blunder knight takes d6, because it will make the game a lot less interesting. Had he started with knight e8, the position I think is completely unclear. Black could be doing quite well, actually. But yeah, this kind of makes... It's possible for me, of course, to misplay even this position, but generally speaking, this is you know, very, very close to completely winning position for white. And I don't want to allow black this blockading square on d6. I want to, since my position is so good, I want to try and win it by, you know, the most forcing way possible. Although queen b8, a move which I originally missed, might be a bit annoying here, because I thought black has no real way to challenge this pawn immediately, and then d6 of course is the correct way to proceed, but queen b8 was quite strong. Even this is actually a lot trickier for white than I thought. I think my original premise was just incorrect. I should not have allowed this. So I am now attempting to trade in my original advantages here. He can take on d5, I will take with the knight. And he can take on d6, I will take on a6. And he even wins the pawn back by taking on e4, but that endgame is very, very unpleasant for black. But I think had I not played d6, I could have won a simpler game. After queen b8, I can probably once again just switch to this. I don't need to try and hang on to the d6 pawn, you know, with all my might, because just taking on a6 is perfectly fine. And my domination over the light squares, even sort of very deep inside black's structure, is quite remarkable here. Black has very few moves even available to him, such as my complete control over the light squares. It's not easy to play as you're growing older. Obviously, you understand some things better. You also gain a lot of experience, which might be very useful. But on a very simple physical level, processes are not as fast. You know, you don't calculate as cleanly. You don't calculate as fast. You make mistakes, I think, a lot more often than when you were young. At least in my case. This is not necessary, but it wins some material, so I thought, why not? Or at least I thought it wins some material. Completely missed knight c7 as an idea, but I don't think it actually improves black's situation all that much. I'm learning Greenfield from your videos, but there are really a lot. Should I keep doing it or choose an easier opening? Well, Nino, what can I say? I don't think... The thing about my Greenfield videos is I did try to be sort of as comprehensive and as thorough as I could possibly be. And there is, as a result of that policy, there is a great deal of material. I fully realize that. But I don't think other openings will necessarily present you with a sort of a smaller field of study. I actually wanted to play rook takes d8 and then I took on e6. This is a really weird mind bug. Not that my position is suddenly not winning, but rook takes d8. I even calculated a specific line which I thought was very close to completely winning, and then I played bishop takes e6. I really should play and not talk. But the point is, when you say easier openings, it really is a matter of, let's say, something like chosen arbitrarily, like the Slav, or I don't know, Queen's Gambit accepted. If done properly, I think it will not be a smaller or an easier video series than what I've done for the Greenfield. It's just a question of how you approach video making. I'm not doing this the right way, but I do have two connected extra pawns on the queen side, so it should be enough. So the question does become, you know, if perhaps you know, the material might be a bit difficult for. I really am not doing it properly. I saw that I was about to run into knight d7 and I completely ignored it. But rook b7 is a really weird move which allows me back in, and now I should stabilize and win reasonably easily, I think. Actually, I will just do this. I think it makes my life easier here. I lose some material, but at least my pawns are connected now, and I can switch to sort of an easier conversion idea. trade off some pieces, and then start pushing. It wasn't a blunder. Knight c6, bc6 was actually, I think, the fastest way to me to convert here. But I wanted to just stop discussing it so I don't miss anything. You know, you could maybe argue that Greenfield is hard to play if you don't know any theory, because you might end up in with very bad positions, and some openings are easier to play just by feel, and it might be true. But in general, I don't think, you know, when approached with the degree of seriousness that I did, that I chose when I was recording those videos, there are very few openings out there right now which are, you know, which can be sufficiently conquered in a week. Not sure what Prokofiev picture you're talking about there. I don't mind non-chess topics at all, but I'm not entirely sure which picture you're talking about, so I can't really answer. If you could maybe let me just try and figure out what people are talking about. Some Prokofiev picture. Prokofiev was famously reasonably interested in chess, but I'm not a huge authority on his life and on his chess connection. Ah, the picture you have on your profile. Let me have a look. Yeah, can't see it. But as mentioned, there are people out there who'd be a lot better qualified to speak on that subject. I'm not particularly... What did I just do? Sorry about that. That's a tournament Mateusz, a game Mateusz Bartel won in the Polish team championship today, I guess. It wasn't supposed to pop up on your screen, but we are back to sort of normal order of business. Yeah, I quite like is probably an understatement. Because I am a father of a up-and-coming musician, I've become a lot more acquainted with classical music than I used to be, and yeah, I like Prokofiev. Although, of all the things Daniel played in his reasonably short career so far, the thing I really enjoyed the most were some Shostakovich pieces, which he no longer plays, to my sadness. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing here. I generally didn't really play 6e5 when I was a King's Indian player. I played all those Bishop e2, Knight bd7 sidelines, which is quite different to the normal stuff. And the Averbach, which is I think what we're playing right now, is not something I ever studied properly anyway, and definitely not in the last 10 years or so. So I'm sort of confused and very unsure as to what I'm doing here. Knight fd7 followed by knight c5, and then hopefully maybe I can push f5, and then my position might look a bit more human. Isn't the knight silly on h3? I guess you mean a6. It's a reasonably normal square for these types of positions for this knight, because it stops the potential a3 before advances white very often makes in these types of structures. And it also controls the c5 square. Now I'm putting the other knight on c5, but generally it gets to c5 very often in these types of positions. And c5 is by far the best square available to black knights in this structure. It has its ups and downs, TRS. It's not all sweetness and light, but I can't really complain all that much about the life I've been given. Yeah, we could maybe start a book club, the way, Norm Macdonald, some of you probably will know who Norm Macdonald is, and I should thank Jan for introducing me to Norm a long, long time ago. Norm Macdonald at some point ran a book club on Twitter, which, sounds like a completely preposterous idea, but when Norm was doing it, it actually made sense. So we could do a bit of a book club during these shows. But not right now. I wonder if I should just switch to some kind of all-out attack on the king side, but I want to drive this knight away first. And now, with the knights on a6 and c5, I feel kind of silly. It feels more natural to try and trade this bishop off than to play f4 and g5, because I honestly don't believe I can give mate with so many pieces stuck on the queen side. I think it's much more likely I will get rolled over on the queen side in the meantime. Yeah, Norm Macdonald the comedian. Norm Macdonald is an incredibly well-read guy, and he has some very, very strong opinions on literature. Not all of them I would agree with, but he makes a lot of sense when he's talking about books. Alright, so now I have the option of picking up a ton of material, which is probably something I should do, despite the fact that it costs me my my pride and joy, and every time you need to exchange off this bishop you feel kind of sad, but it does win me an exchange and a pawn here, so it's hard not to. That was actually a very premature resignation, because it sounds a bit ridiculous, but I would definitely continue even in a classical game here, because my remaining pieces as black here are very discoordinated. The pawn on b7 is hanging, it's a bit awkward to defend, and you will have some counterplay on the queen side. But yeah, it's an unpleasant blunder to make, and I realize why my opponent felt probably slightly dejected and resigned, but yeah, you could play on. Alright, so we're 2 hours in, and I seem to still be half alive, so we'll continue for a bit. I think the next show on Chess24 starts in about an hour, so we can definitely do another half an hour at least. Norm is a very interesting guy. To sort of wrap up my completely uncalled for tangent on the subject of Norm Macdonald the comedian. Norm is a very, very interesting guy. If my opponent here goes e5, knight fd7 and h4, I will probably not be able to remember the theory and will lose, but Oh, yeah, I was supposed to go knight a6. Crap. Yeah, that was a bit of a misclick there, because you're supposed to go knight a6, of course, precisely for this reason. This is very well known for being quite bad for black. Oh dear. Don't do this at home or not at home either. This is really, really horrible, and it's been known to be horrible for a very, very long time. JB's, as mentioned, I owe my very serious debt of gratitude on this subject to Jan, who introduced me. I used to know not a lot, but a little bit about the British stand-up scene due to watching some. I used to have a skybox before it quite literally burned down, so I watched some of that, and I had very little, next to no idea at all about the US stand-up scene, which is obviously, you know, it has a very, very rich and interesting tradition. And Jan introduced me to a lot of people who you kind of need to know if you are interested in that genre in general. Bishop e3 is very strong. Starting with knight g5 is also probably quite decent. The simple castling here is also very strong. My only hope is to start. Yeah, but this probably kind of loses to the long castle. Yeah, this is going to be a very ugly game. If he castles long here, I have almost no way to stop bishop d5 properly, so yeah. But the general reason for all this happening is that quite clearly, I mean, I played this position quite seriously when, as mentioned, when I was younger, and I played knight a6, castle c5, d5 lines, and I knew them quite well, and I had some ideas there which were fresh and did not really tail in with what other people were doing. And then I just completely mixed up the orders. And this, I mean, objectively, this has to be completely lost, I think. Not worse, just completely lost. I'm very much in the Dostoevsky camp in the question of Dostoevsky or Tolstoy. Norm, on the other hand, does not consider Dostoevsky to be a great writer, and thinks Tolstoy is the best writer to have ever graced the God's green earth, which is one of the opinions, as mentioned, I would personally not agree with. Yeah, this is not enjoyable. F takes e5 might win by force. I've tried calculating it to the end and I sort of failed, and also I'm making moves which have no alternative to them, so it doesn't really matter to me if it wins or not, because I still don't have anything else to play. But it might actually sort of conclude the game there and then. Fe5, knight takes e5. This is a weird choice there. This I don't understand. This seems to let me completely off the hook. Yeah, now I'm fine. But that sequence was just very difficult to understand, because my opponent seemed to be playing almost pitch perfect chess up to that point, and then he played knight takes e5. Not quite sure what to make of that. No, I'm actually better, which is frankly a bit of a travesty considering how bad my position was early in the game. You can actually play rook d1 here somewhat amusingly, because I cannot take twice, I will get mated along the back rank. Okay, so something must have happened to my opponent in between moves, let's say 15 and 17, because this position has to be close to completely winning for white, maybe winning by force, and in 5 moves time I had an extra pawn and was thinking about conversion. And yeah, just to reiterate, if you're planning to, first and foremost, main theoretical move in this position is of course c5, with all the theory starting with bishop b5 check, bishop d7, e5, which is something which didn't really appeal to me at any point in my career studying these forced move lines. So I began playing castles. There are two issues with this move order. First of all, it allows, as I mentioned live on air, it allows this, which leads after something like this, for instance. It leads to unbelievably messy positions which you need to study very, very carefully with black so as not to get immediately mated. And also there is this h6, d takes c3, g takes f7 line, which is a lot of fun to analyze, especially with modern computers, but I mean it's also tremendously risky for black, and you need to know what you're doing here or you will just lose. And secondly, after bishop d3 you have to play knight a6, white generally castles, you play c5. If white takes on a6 here, you of course take on d4, this is a very important position, so otherwise you're in a lot of trouble. White plays d5, and in this position there is a great deal of theory. You can play rook b8, you can play bishop g4. I was generally in the bishop g4 camp, although rook b8 is also very, very interesting and very playable. So this was my intention, and then I just blitzed out c5 for no reason whatsoever. And after d takes c5, black is already in, you know, it's not that easy to find a position, I think, where you without blundering any material, where you're doing as poorly as you are here after 7 moves. Because white has complete control over the center, you have no real development, you have to trade off your developed knight on d5, as I did, and after queen e2 and bishop e4, you know, it's very obvious just from looking at the position just how unpleasant it is for black. Moving on. How much do I like Game of Thrones? Quite a lot, but not fanatically. Let's try something quirky here. Let's see if my opponent wants to play the Alikine. If he does that, this is just an Alikine with an extra tempo for blacks, which of course must be excellent. Because he ended up spending 2 tempi on c4 instead of 1. And here black actually develops quite a lot of pressure against the white center. This is a typical Alikine type position where, well, now that he hasn't even played b3, he is just strategically very close to losing. Because this knight, it very, very quickly gets from c8 to f5. and then it's just horrible for white. And now he, since he failed to prevent knight f5, I just win the central pawn for nothing. But even if white doesn't really sort of fall apart to such an alarming degree, these types of positions are very playable for black. The thing about IQs, Dr. Vet, is you can actually train them, as I found out at some point. So the question, I think, is a little bit immaterial, especially if the person who is being tested is an adult who has access to training materials. Last time I checked, it was around 140, but it really has no relevance. What I want to... I mean, it looks really weird to trade this dead bishop on e3 for my beautiful knight on e5. But I don't want to allow some... You know, if he takes on f5 here, plays knight g3, then plays something like f5, I might... I will include one more move, and then I will take on e3 if he plays knight g3, because I think if he takes on f5, I can survive this. But what I wanted to say about IQ tests is, at some point, sort of out of curiosity, I bought a book called like 100 IQ tests, and I started solving them. And you solve them sort of fairly and squarely. You take whatever time is allotted, like they give you 40 minutes or something, maybe half an hour. You solve them fairly without, you know, consulting any material. And then after you've completed the first one, there are answers at the back. So you look at the answers at the back, and you check the ones you couldn't solve, and you look at the answers. And although no explanation is given, anyone who is, you know, even, you know, with any kind of intelligence at all, will be able from the answers to deduce how the answers were arrived at. And then you solve another set. And I've done this for like 5 sets in a row, improved my results by maybe 10 points, and decided that the system doesn't really make much sense if it can be gamed like that, so to speak. I haven't been converting this particularly well. But now I can finally maybe switch to winning more material, and I could play b6 even on the previous move. I'm not sure which Albert King you mean, so I can't really say. I think there was a blues guitarist called Albert King. And if that's the Albert King you mean, he is rather good. Yeah, that's sort of my point, Sanakoyev, yeah. If the test has been done reasonably early, it might actually mean something, but I was born in the Soviet Union. We didn't really have IQ tests, so I only got introduced to them at a reasonably late age, and then it doesn't really matter much at all. The Albert King, the blues guitarist, is very good. Not my favorite blues guitarist of all time, but I probably still have some recordings of his on the shelves somewhere. He's probably not even the best blues guitarist called King. There's some serious competition there. I mean, I still really like Clapton, and I used to like Robert Cray a great deal, and from the classical ones, I mean, Howlin' Wolf, the London sessions with Howlin' Wolf and the Young Turks, you know, there's Clapton as support there. If you ever have an occasion to pick up, there's like a 3 CD box set of I'm not sure what I'm doing here, of Howlin' Wolf playing with some young dudes in London in, I think, the late 60s. That's fantastic. One of my, I think I may have told this story to some people, so I don't know if you maybe have, although probably not. One of my biggest, lifetime regrets was there was a World Team Championship in 1997 in Lucerne, Switzerland, and it was, I think, 4+1, 4 main players and a reserve player. So people would have days off. And I had a day off on one of the rounds. I can't remember who we were playing, but the team gave me a day off. And on the day off, I went walking in Lucerne. I went just sort of on a stroll. And I noticed posters saying that John Mayall was playing in a club somewhere in Lucerne, and it turned out that he was playing on the previous night. So I could have gone, because it was sort of on the night before my rest day. Nobody would have objected at all, because since they decided not to field me, it was my personal time. So I had an opportunity to listen to Mayall live once in my life, and I missed it through not being informed properly. And I'm not sure Peter Green is better than Clapton. I have some Peter Green records. I don't actually agree with that assessment. But Mayall I really like. And without Mayall, the British blues scene would definitely look a lot different. A lot of people who formed, the most important supergroups of the future. I mean, Fleetwood Mac would probably not exist without Mayall's influence, and Clapton played with Mayall in his early years, and so on and so forth. Stevie Ray Vaughan is great, but I mean, there's plenty out there. I used to know a few things about that, as you probably can tell. I mean, my memory is a bit hazy, but I used to be able, there are these diagrams of how, let's say, Fleetwood Mac and the Cream and the John Mayall Band all interconnect, and how people sort of migrated from one to the other, and there was a period in my life where I could actually draw that diagram reasonably confidently. Not anymore. Yeah, I could have played e5 on the previous move. It wasn't wrong. But it's not, I think, critical to have played it earlier. Yeah, the Cream is fantastic. I'm not sure I should have played c4 though. I've created this weakness which my opponent now has a chance to play against. As usual, I'm not really converting it particularly cleanly. I thought by playing rook b3 I will create some kind of additional pressure, but I'm not sure what that pressure is now, looking at the position. Yeah, kind of unhappy about a number of decisions I've taken over the past couple of moves. I'll There are some tactical shots I could go for, but it does feel like I'm about to switch for, about to switch to playing for cheapos, which is really not how you should approach winning positions like this. It feels a bit ridiculous to suddenly start calculating cheapos. Rook dc1 followed by knight d1 is a decent defensive idea, actually. I'm kind of wondering if I should maybe start switching to, you know, combining the ideas on the king side and on the queen side. Just completely forget about the c4 pawn for now. Create something for my opponent to think about on the other half of the board. But yeah, this is clearly not how the game should have developed. I don't think I should have had all these issues. Lots of blasphemy against Eric going on in chat. Although I have nothing against, you know, the worship of Bruce and Baker. And of course, you know, I do own the complete Robert Johnson set, which all of the guys you've named would have listed as one of their primary influences. It's kind of important not to blunder anything here, which is possible now. For instance, I wanted to play rook d3 here, but after g4 I would have to make some uncomfortable moves. But g4 is not an easy move to make, and actually I have a very beautiful shot if he plays g4 here. I can play queen e4 because his back rank is so weak. Very, very happy that I was given an opportunity to show this sort of live in the game. That's a nice conclusion to this game, but I think from a certain moment on my conversion was maybe not the cleanest. And Jimmy, of course. Really, I mean, there was a period when I listened to Jimmy more or less non-stop. The 3 Experience albums. Okay, let's make it another couple, and then I'll probably wrap this up because we need to make way for the next shows, and also I do feel I'm getting a bit tired there. More struggles in the modern. Oh, no modern. It is now a Queen's Indian. I think I lost some games. One by a weird mouse sleep type thing, but I also, I think, lost some games normally, so to speak. Generally speaking, this is supposed to be quite good for black, although it's still, I mean, it looks fantastic, but it's not such a great deal. White, although, I mean, allowing this knight to leave is supported by both pawns is a mistake, I think. You should take en passant on c6. Because if you allow this knight on d4 to survive like this, black will just have you know, tremendous initiative in the center and you know, on the king side eventually, due to the fact that there is this monster on d4. No one has named Robert Page yet, which I think is also a name that should feature at some point. Maybe I should have taken with a pawn. This is a bit less ambitious. Yeah, I'm a bit unhappy I didn't take with the pawn, because what I got here is a very pleasant position, but not really you know, as good as I'd hoped for when my knight on d4 was allowed to stay there uncontested. Sorry about that, dude. But at this stage of the day, I will pick up blundered pieces without too much hesitation. How long is a rope? A rope, I think, is 10 seconds? The entire turn, I think, is 70 seconds and the rope is 10 seconds. Is that correct? I think it is. Okay, probably this will not count as a full game, so... two more. Yeah, Alvin Lee, I've heard Alvin Lee live. They came to Moscow at some point, and I heard 10 years after. I heard 10 years after live. They were good. Okay, so this is sort of my home when I was playing the King's Indian seriously, but rook e1, rook b1. I'm not entirely sure what I'm supposed to do, because if I play a5, some positions I might get later on in some of the lines might become worse. One thing that I do remember is that if you play, now I will definitely play this in rook e8. I think after we've included all these moves, this has to be the way for me to go. It's important to note, it's been known for a while, but maybe you haven't seen this in books or somewhere, so I will say this. In these positions, it's very important not to play rook e8 before you take on d4, because white then will play d5, and he will feel quite happy that your rook is on e8 and not f8, because knight e8 is no longer a move, and the rook generally needs to support the f5 break. Here, I am very curious if I can play d5, to be honest. Because in these types of positions, it's very tempting to try and solve your way out of them by tactical means. But you very often run into things like ed5, cd5, knight db5, or maybe cd5, cd5, knight db5. This is the kind of a reply white normally goes for in order to try and prove his advantage here. If you take on d5 twice, I just play knight b6 and I'm pretty sure I'm fine. But playing knight b5 in many cases, as my opponent correctly demonstrates, is the way for white to fight for advantage. But in particular, with the rook already on b1, I should have enough counterplay here, because I will have an extra tempo on to play bishop f5, for instance, and force rook a1. And now I can probably immediately equalize by playing knight d3, I feel, but I want to look for more. If I play knight d3, he takes, I take on e1, he takes, I take on d3. The only move that worries me is d5. No, it doesn't work. Then this is quite good. If I do this, the rook is hanging, but also very importantly, I threaten queen b6 check, which is an even more important detail. And now the pawn on d5 is hanging, and if he plays d6, what I originally missed is that I can take on b5 and then play queen b6 check, and I win the piece. Because if I start with queen b6 check, bishop e3 attacks my queen, and I'm not in time to pick up this knight on d5. Okay, if I concede the point about Peter Green, will you admit that Clapton is also quite decent? How about we strike a deal like that, E. McClay? I never said Peter Green wasn't good. I have his records. I enjoy his music, but okay. So I should be better here. But the thing is, if I take on d5, actually I should just take on d5, because I take, he takes, I can take this knight, the one on b5, not the one on d5. And he has no way to keep his knight on d5. Knight e7 check though. Knight e7 check followed by bishop g5 or something. It might be annoying. If I take on b5 and d5, I'm also a little bit better, but I'm very reluctant to give up my bishop pair here. If I start with queen d7, he plays a4, I play rook e8, and he can play bishop e3, I think. Many good options, but I'm not sure which one is best. If not for knight e7 check, I would have already taken on d5 and b5, because that would be a very pleasant position. But knight e7 check followed by probably bishop g5 in particular is worrying me. I will go for like a mixture of all the things. I mentioned, which generally turns out to be worse than all of them, but somehow this is what I settled on. I want to force him to play a4, and then I want to take on b5, force him to take with the knight, and then take with the knight takes d5, followed by rook e8. The thing about that position is that white is... No, this is, I think, quite wrong, because this pawn will be very, very weak now in every single variation. He really, I think, needed to take with the knight on b5. This position, I'm very, very certain I'm much better. Something like queen d1 is an option, but after I can even take on c3 and b5, but I want to do this because it's a lot more concrete. The knight needs to go somewhere now, because bishop g5, knight takes c3, I just win on the spot. So knight goes somewhere. I can take on b5, or I can jump with the knight to some nice square, and it probably is even stronger, like something like knight b4. Might be very, very good there. There's some ridiculousness being mooted in chat right now. I mean, with all my, greatest respects for money for nothing and chicks for free, mentioning Knopfler in the same sentence as all the other guys. Come on. Are there any JJ Kale fails in chat? somehow, you know, mentioning of Knopfler put me in mind of, yeah, that sentence is not grammatically correct, but J.J. Cale is very, very good. Okay, so don't know if I should say anything else about this game. Just to show you what I was talking about. In this position, if black actually drives the knight from d5 somewhere towards normal squares, like knight c3, bishop c6, black, despite equal material, is quite seriously better here, because he has those two monster bishops on non-diagonals and lots of pressure everywhere, and white is still somewhat undeveloped, which means that he will probably not be able to put his pieces on any kind of good squares. But then I spotted that he can play knight e7 check and bishop g5, followed by rook d1, and I can take on b2, but then it becomes a bit worrying, because if the bishop ever lands on f6, I will kind of regret my risk taking. So I settled with this. He should take with the knight and then find some kind of a decent move in this position. Maybe just give up on the b2 pawn and play rook d1, something like maybe simply bishop g5, bishop b2, rook d1. And white has, you know, decent counterplay, because now my pieces are a little bit discoordinated. Okay, one final game somewhere, and we'll probably call it a day. People quoting Rolling Stone magazine rankings. I think the whole idea of ranking musicians by betterness, you know, is preposterous. It's all a matter of taste to such a great degree that I don't think there's any point to any of this. This, I think, is very close to a game I won against Alexei Dreyev in one of the early Russian championships. I have a feeling this is almost the exact position. And it's generally these types of positions are very, very risky for black, because he is so far behind in development that he needs to be very careful not to drift into a, you know, properly poor position. Not sure about queen e4 though. Maybe I should have gone queen d1. Queen d1 is a bit more modest and restrained. My point was, though, that with the queen on d1, black in this position could play e7, e5, which would be a very decent move. And with the queen on e4, I can take with a check. So I was trying to play against, you know, this precise option, which I wanted to deny my opponent. They generally don't teach the classics in normal Russian schools. This is very ambitious by the devil worshipper. If I castle first and then take on d4, he has bishop f6, which I guess is his point. I think maybe the easiest is just to finish development and castle kingside and just ignore this. Yeah, I do need to find a comfortable square for this queen, although the way he's been doing... Yeah, bishop takes d4, he will, I think, just recapture on d4, and if queen takes d4, he can play bishop f6, and then take on c3, and he will actually have, you know, very definite compensation for the pawn there. It's actually not as clear-cut as I would have hoped. And I have a feeling I'm about to blunder something, but I will make this move. Because I think it's important for me to deny him the d6 and f6 squares for his bishop. It might backfire if I'm missing some tactical... I think this probably isn't... unless g5 is strong, but I don't see why g5 would work. But now if he plays f5, I have knight takes c5. I think he had to go knight bishop f8 and then play f5 after queen f4. Queen h5 always runs into g6, so I don't see why I should put my queen there. It's a square which actually allows black to make a move he probably wants to make anyway with tempo. Something like knight d7 is probably black's best choice here, but... Okay, what am I missing? Because it seems to me like I'm completely winning now, because the knight on d4 gets lost. Yeah, it doesn't really feel like I'm missing something here. So this should be more or less the conclusion of this game. The knight seems to be just lost on d4. I see no way to even save it and continue the game. I am very much a Stones man in the Stones v Beatles argument. Okay, that's how shall we call it? A nice try for a misclick or a bit of a blunder. But yeah, I think we have to wrap it up to allow some time before this and the next show by, I think, I am Ostrovsky potentially. Although, I'm sorry, I'm mispronouncing his name. I will not attempt that again. But yeah, thanks for watching. I've done, in terms of result, I seem to have done slightly better today by concentrating more on the board than on chat during games, despite some early mishaps. This will be the last show until at least mid-October and maybe even mid-November, depending on how life goes. I will try and do something, I mean, apart from, I will definitely try and do well in the Tal Memorial proper, but I might try and do something during the tournament, but no promises. And once again, thanks for keeping me company in chat. Thanks for the entertaining blues discussion. I haven't had those in a while. And I'll see you at some point in the future. Cheers. This has been Peter Svidler for Chess24.